He called me just as the first snow began to fall. His voice calm, almost rehearsed. "I'm coming for Christmas," he said. I didn't ask why. I only started packing. Clara lives in a quiet, snow-dusted town where lights flicker on old lampposts and the smell of pine hangs in the air. Once in love, now careful and wary, she has built a life full of small routines and fragile peace. The news that her ex is returning threatens to crack that calm, stirring old memories and unspoken questions. This Christmas, nothing feels familiar, and every shadow seems to whisper what could have been. The phone rang just as the streetlights outside blinked into life. I wasn't expecting anyone. The snow had begun to fall lightly, brushing the windowpane with quiet white flakes. I watched them for a moment, letting the calm settle over me. Then the screen lit up. His name froze. I didn't answer at first. My thumb hovered. The room felt colder than the winter night pressing against the glass. I could hear the faint hum of the radiator, the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, the distant bark of a dog somewhere down the street. Each sound felt sharper, as if the world had decided to remind me that I was alone. "Swipe." "Clara," he said. His voice was the same. Familiar. Almost too smooth. "I'm coming back for Christmas." The words lingered in the room, heavier than snow. I didn't respond immediately. I could feel my chest tightening, my stomach twisting. I remembered the last Christmas we spent together. The scent of pine needles, the warm smell of cinnamon in the kitchen. His jacket draped over the chair like he hadn't left it behind. I remembered the laughter, and then the quiet arguments, the long silences that followed. The way he used to leave without saying goodbye. Okay, I said finally, my voice barely more than a whisper. He chuckled softly, the sound threading through my memory like an old, familiar song. "I'll see you soon." And then the line went dead. I set the phone down slowly. The snow outside had thickened. The street was empty. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I moved toward the mantel, where old photographs leaned against each other like ghosts. I traced my fingers over them, the edges worn from years of handling, the corners curling slightly. There we were, smiling at Christmas morning. His hand brushing against mine in a way that felt effortless then, and now almost painful to remember. I didn't touch the kettle, didn't light a candle. The room felt sterile, almost foreign. The quiet pressed in around me. Each memory hit like a whisper of ice. The ornaments on the tree, the glow of the fireplace, the warmth of his jacket pressed against my shoulder. I had worked so hard to build distance, to stitch together a small life of calm routines and careful solitude. One call had undone it. I moved to my dresser, pulling open a drawer with deliberate slowness. Inside, my hands found the bag I had packed last winter, a bag that had never left the closet. I emptied it on the bed, folding clothes slowly, as if moving too quickly would shatter something delicate inside me. Sweater. His favorite scarf, long since returned. A pair of socks I liked because they smelled faintly of cedarwood. I paused with each item, feeling the weight of memory pressing against fabric. Every stitch seemed to whisper, "Remember, remember, remember." Outside, the snow settled heavier now, softening the edges of the world. I could hear the faint crunch of tires on a distant road. Car. Someone passing. Life continuing. And here I was, standing in the quiet of my own apartment, folding clothes for a journey I hadn't decided I wanted to take. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the bag rest between my knees. I could feel the soft fabric against my fingers. It was small. Not much could fit inside. But that was the point. I didn't want to carry the past with me any more than I had to. And yet, every fold of every garment carried fragments of it, uninvited and persistent. I remembered the way he used to enter the room, shoulders relaxed, smiling without effort. I remembered the smell of winter coats pressed together in the hallway closet. I remembered the argument that had ended everything, quiet, sharp, almost polite in its cruelty. I had told myself that memory would fade. But here now, in the dim glow of a single lamp and the hush of snowfall, it was all too clear. The phone buzzed again. I ignored it. I knew it would be him. I didn't need to see the name. I could feel it in my chest, like the echo of a bell in an empty church. Instead, I zipped the bag slowly, each click deliberate, each movement a small act of defense. I packed enough to leave, but not enough to return. I was preparing for something that might never come, for a confrontation I wasn't sure I wanted. The shadows in the room stretched long against the walls, flickering faintly with the lamp's glow. I glanced at the window, where snow was piling silently on the sill. It made the world outside soft, gentle, forgiving, almost as if it didn't know that my life was about to change again. I moved toward the door, bag in hand, and paused. The floor creaked under my weight, and for a moment I imagined him standing there, smiling but not with his eyes. I wondered if he knew the storm he carried with him, the quiet unease he left behind. Could one voice undo months of careful distance? I couldn't answer that yet. I closed the door gently behind me, letting it click without force. The hall smelled faintly of pine from a neighbor's wreath. The snow outside pressed against the glass like it wanted to remind me. Life continues even when the past calls. I stepped out into the cold, into the quiet, into the waiting unknown. And as the snowflakes landed softly on my coat, I realized that leaving, even for a little while, was not just about avoiding him. It was about remembering myself. The phone remained on the mantel, dark and silent. For now that was enough. The morning light was pale, filtered through a thick veil of snow. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. The town was quiet, almost too quiet. The rooftops were white, like sugar dusted across dark tiles. Children's laughter drifted faintly from the street below, muffled by snow and distance. It sounded fragile, almost unreal. I couldn't tell if I envied them or resented them. The window pane was icy under my fingertips. I traced a circle where warmth had touched it, a small imprint of a hand that wasn't mine. The street was empty, save for footprints that led nowhere and back again. I breathed in slowly, letting the cold fill my lungs, grounding me in the quiet. And yet inside a storm churned. It had started the moment I heard his voice the night before. A storm I couldn't see, couldn't touch, but one that made my chest feel tight and my hands tremble. I moved to the kitchen without turning away from the window. The kettle waited, silver and still, its spout catching frostlight like a trapped reflection. I filled it with water, the sound a soft hiss in the muted room. The radiator clunked once, then went silent. Even the cat seemed cautious, her tail flicking slowly, as if she, too, felt the tension hovering. I set the kettle on the stove and stared at it, pretending it wasn't him I was thinking of. The first sip of coffee was bitter and hot. I held the mug with both hands, letting warmth seep into fingers still cold from the window. I imagined the snow outside pressing down on the world, softening edges, quieting sounds. I wanted to believe it could do the same for me. That it could shield me from the anxiety curling in my stomach, the dread that had kept me awake last night. Didn't. The apartment was too still. I moved mechanically through my morning routine, brushing hair, choosing clothes, pulling on socks. Everything felt heavier than it should. Every motion, even simple ones, carried the weight of the decision I'd made. Could leave today. Or I could wait. Either way, the thought of seeing him, of being in the same town, breathing the same cold air, made my hands curl into fists. I glanced back at the window. The children had built a small snowman, its coal eyes crooked, its carrot nose a little askew. One of them tumbled backward into the snow, and a shriek of laughter followed. I swallowed, the sound echoing faintly in my own chest. The snow seemed like a pause in time, a delicate hush before the world exhaled again. I wanted to stay here, to stay in this moment where danger and memory hadn't yet caught up to me. But leaving wasn't simple. Even as I considered my packed bag, the reality pressed against me. He was coming. He would arrive, and the quiet of the snow would mean nothing. The confrontation was inevitable. I wondered if escaping now would save me from heartbreak, or if it would only postpone the moment when everything came tumbling back. The kettle whistled softly. I jumped slightly at the sound, the first real noise in the apartment since dawn. I poured the water over my coffee grounds, watching steam rise and curl into the air. It blurred the room, softening the edges of furniture, the floorboards, the walls. I imagined that blur could carry me away, hide me from the past, hide me from him. I moved to the window again, lifting the sash just a crack. Cold air rushed in sharp and clean. It smelled of snow, of pine, of distant smoke from chimneys. I drew it in slowly, hoping it could clear my mind, even a little. The children were gone now, leaving tiny prints and a discarded mitten behind. I traced them with my eyes. The scene was innocent, joyful, and it hurt in its simplicity. I sank onto the edge of the sofa, the bag at my feet. It was small, but it felt heavy with possibility. Every fold of cloth, every zipper tug, carried not just belongings, but decisions, memories, and unspoken fears. Closed my eyes. I could feel him everywhere, though he wasn't here. The snow outside was silent, but inside, my chest pounded like it remembered. I thought about the night before. The sound of his voice in the dark, casual, confident. "I'm coming for Christmas," he had said. I had nodded, barely speaking, my thumb hovering over the phone screen. It was just words. But they felt like a key turning in a lock I had carefully welded shut months ago. I sipped my coffee slowly. The warmth helped, but only just. The apartment was still, the world outside paused, and yet every shadow seemed alive. I imagined him walking these streets, tracing the same paths I walked as a child, as a girl who thought love could last forever. I wondered if he remembered the snow like I did. I wondered if he remembered me. The bag sat heavy at my side. I touched it lightly, as if to reassure myself it was real. I had choices: leave now or stay. Either way, the snow would melt, the quiet would break, and the storm he carried with him would come. I drew my coat closer, shoulders hunched, and glanced one last time at the snow settling on the windowsill. It was pure, untouched, a world that didn't yet know what was coming. I traced my fingers over the frost, imagining it could freeze time, even for a moment. Could the snow shield me from the past? Or would it only make the coming storm louder, harder to ignore? I didn't have an answer. Only the bag, the snow, and a quiet, aching pause. The morning stretched on, slow and deliberate. And for the first time I realized that leaving today might not be about escape. It might be about surviving the storm that was already inside me. The children's laughter had faded completely now. The street outside glimmered, white and still. Picked up the bag. One step at a time I moved toward the door. The floor creaked like it remembered, and I smiled faintly, though no one was there to see it. The snow rested on the windowsill, waiting, watching. Patient, just like me. The room smelled faintly of pine. The wreath on the door had dried slightly, its needles brittle under my fingers. I touched it lightly, and the scent clung to my coat, a whisper of Christmases that felt impossibly far away. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft purr of the cat, curled in a sunbeam that barely touched the floor. She didn't move when I entered, only watched with unknowing eyes, as if she sensed tension without understanding it. I knelt by the bed and pulled the small suitcase closer. It had been empty for months. Now it lay open like a quiet challenge. I began with a sweater, soft and worn, its sleeves frayed at the cuffs. It carried his scent faintly, a memory I hadn't asked for. I folded it slowly, as if gentle movements could make the past less heavy. Next, a stack of books, their spines lined like soldiers in a forgotten parade. Each one reminded me of long evenings we had shared, reading together, arguing softly about characters and endings, a warmth that now felt impossible. I paused, fingers brushing against a small box of letters. They were tied with ribbon, faded and delicate. I lifted one, unfolded it carefully. His handwriting was precise, familiar. Each curve of a letter a small echo of the man I once loved. I read a few lines and felt the ache in my chest deepen. There was a sentence that made me smile softly, and then another that pricked at old wounds. I folded it back, pressed it into the box, and whispered to myself, "This one stays." Some memories could stay. Some I would tuck into the suitcase, and some I would burn quietly in my mind. The ornaments came next. Glass baubles in reds and greens, delicate and fragile. I held one up, catching the morning light, and it reflected my own tired eyes back at me. We had hung these on the tree together, laughing when one slipped and clattered against the floor. Now I placed them gently in tissue paper, careful not to let the glass shatter, careful not to let the memory shatter me. I felt like a curator of loss, cataloguing moments I could neither relive nor forget. The cat stretched, paws reaching toward the sunlight, tail curling like a question mark. I watched her and felt a pang of envy. She existed without memory, without regret. I envied the simplicity of her world, and I envied her peace. The apartment smelled stronger of pine now, mingled with paper and cloth, and it felt hollow, almost mocking in its cheer. I paused at a small picture frame. It showed us on Christmas Eve, younger, smiling with a kind of carelessness I had long forgotten. He smiled, but not with his eyes, something I noticed only now, all these years later. I placed the photo face down, a deliberate act of distance. I didn't want to forget him entirely, but I needed to stop inviting him in. Every object, every fold, every box told a story. Some I could carry, some I needed to leave behind. I stacked sweaters one by one, pressing them into the suitcase. Each fold was a heartbeat, slow and deliberate. The books followed, arranged with precision. I paused after each item, breathing slowly, listening to the quiet. Even the cat had stopped purring, lying still now, sensing the tension in the room. I thought about leaving the apartment like this, bare and empty, the memories packed into a suitcase small enough to carry. Would it free me, or simply concentrate all the ache into one place I couldn't avoid? The letters went next. I separated them carefully, deciding which to carry and which to leave in drawers. Each one felt like a decision, a small weighing of love, loss, and endurance. I burned some in my mind, imagining them disappearing in a quiet flame that hurt only for a second. I saved others, folding them gently, tucking them into corners of the suitcase where I hoped they wouldn't press too hard against my chest. I realized suddenly that the act of packing was both a shield and a wound. It was protection and confrontation at once. I reached for a small box of trinkets, a locket, a keychain, a tiny bell he had given me one Christmas. They rattled faintly in my hands, delicate sounds in the quiet room. I pressed them into the suitcase with care, as if arranging them could arrange my heart. The snow outside pressed against the windowsill, white and soft. It reflected in the glass of the ornaments, scattering tiny shards of light across the walls. It was beautiful and cruelly indifferent. I paused and sat on the edge of the bed. The suitcase was almost full. My hands rested on top, warm from exertion but trembling slightly. I listened to the apartment, the soft hum of the radiator, the faint tick of the wall clock, the subtle creak of floorboards as the cat shifted. The weight of memory pressed down, but it was mine to carry, and mine to set aside. I closed the suitcase slowly. The latch clicked in a quiet affirmation. I breathed in the scent of pine and paper, of cloth and memory. The cat jumped onto the windowsill, nose pressed against the frost, watching the snow in contemplative silence. I envied her again, for the simplicity of her life, for the way she existed without ghosts. I touched the bag lightly, testing its weight. It was heavier than I had expected, not with objects but with emotion. I stood and walked to the door, bag in hand. The apartment felt both familiar and foreign. I had moved through it thousands of times, and yet now it seemed a museum of my own past, each object a relic of tenderness and heartbreak. I turned one last time to the shelf where ornaments rested, letters stacked, books aligned. Everything was as it should be. Everything was ready for me to leave. I stepped into the hallway. The air smelled faintly of pine, faintly of winter. The cat watched me go, tail curling like a question. I wondered if the act of packing had saved me, or if it had only drawn the ache into sharper focus. I didn't answer. I only walked forward, one deliberate step at a time. The snow outside waited quietly, patient and indifferent. And I realized as I carried the suitcase toward the door, that some memories could be packed, but some would always follow. They would cling softly like frost on a windowsill. The snow crunched beneath my boots, faint and uneven, breaking the silence of the street. The streetlights shimmered off the ice, elongating shadows and creating paths I barely recognized. Everything seemed familiar yet wrong. The glow of the lamps made the sidewalks look liquid, like melted silver frozen mid-motion. I carried my small bag close to my chest, feeling its weight, feeling the memories packed inside. The wind nipped at my cheeks, but it wasn't the cold that made my fingers stiff. It was the quiet, the emptiness, the knowledge that every corner I passed held pieces of him. I stopped for a moment near the bakery. Its windows fogged with warmth, golden light spilling onto the sidewalk. I could smell bread, cinnamon, sugar, ordinary smells that made the past feel sharper. I remembered him here, standing beside me with his hands tucked into pockets, arguing softly about which loaf to choose. I shook my head and moved on. Even the familiar streets betrayed me. Every bench, every signpost, every crooked lamppost carried echoes of laughter I wasn't supposed to hear anymore. I passed a small shop, its speakers playing carols softly. The tune was gentle, a whisper beneath the snow. My chest tightened. I didn't remember noticing it before, not like this. I lingered for a second, letting the music wrap around me. It brought back quiet evenings we had spent together, decorating, singing half-forgotten lines, stealing glances. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the ache of memory spread slowly like ice along my spine. Opening them, the street looked empty and impartial. The town hadn't changed. Ahead, the footprints I left behind filled quickly with fresh snow, erased almost immediately, as if the world itself wanted to forget. I watched them disappear and felt a pang of envy. I wanted to be invisible, to leave no trace, to vanish like the marks beneath my feet. The silence pressed in around me, only broken by distant sounds. A car braking, a dog barking, the faint clink of a bell somewhere ahead. I realized that even the smallest noises felt intrusive, reminders that the world moved on while I carried everything with me. I turned a corner and passed the old park. The swings hung still, their chains frozen. The slide glittered with ice. I remembered afternoons spent here, him pushing me gently, our hands brushing, his laughter filling the air. I shivered, though the snow was not enough to explain it. The memory felt sharp, brittle, almost like glass underfoot. I could feel it slicing through the calm I had built inside me. The lampposts flickered intermittently, throwing long, uneven shadows. I walked carefully, aware of each echo my boots made on the icy pavement. The town seemed unchanged, yet every familiar corner felt tainted by ghosts. I glanced at the corner cafe, remembering how he used to smile there, not with his eyes, but with his lips, and how I had wanted to believe that smile meant forever. I tightened my grip on the bag. I had chosen to leave the apartment. I had chosen to carry the weight of memory on my own. Yet here, in the quiet of these streets, it felt impossible to escape. I passed a lamppost with its light flickering against a frozen puddle. My reflection stared back at me, pale, eyes tired, shoulders hunched. I looked away quickly, afraid that reflection might speak, might remind me of everything I had tried to forget. The streets were empty, but they weren't safe from memory. They weren't neutral. Every familiar building, every brick, every sign carried the imprint of us. I moved past the library. Its windows glimmered with frost patterns, geometric and delicate. I remembered him holding a book there once, reading aloud softly while I listened. The memory made me pause mid-step. I pressed my fingers to the bag and swallowed. Could I really leave the past behind if it followed me like this, lurking in empty streets and silent buildings? The thought was heavy. It pressed down on me like snow on the roof, cold, persistent, inescapable. A car drove slowly past, tires crunching on ice, sending a cloud of snow swirling into the air. It momentarily erased the quiet, leaving only the white blur of motion. I watched it go, thinking about how life moved, indifferent, past me and past him, past everything. The street returned to silence almost immediately. I let out a small breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The sound seemed loud, intrusive in the stillness. I passed a small church with its doors closed and windows dark. The spire was dusted with snow. I remembered Christmas services, bells ringing softly, the warmth of crowded pews, the way he had held my hand briefly before letting it go. I hugged my coat tighter, trying to gather warmth that wasn't there. I wanted the quiet to shield me, to protect me from everything I feared would follow. But I could feel in the snow, in the shadows, that nothing could hide me completely. I walked further, past the fire station, the corner market, the little diner where we had shared coffee and whispered plans. The town felt indifferent, but I felt every memory pressing into me. It was a weight I could not set down no matter how far I walked. The snow softened the edges of buildings, but it could not soften the sharpness of memory. I realized then that fleeing physically would not erase the past. It would wait, patient, relentless. I stopped at the bridge overlooking the frozen river. The water moved beneath the ice in slow, hidden currents. I traced the lines of frost on the railing with my gloved hand, feeling the cold bite. I wondered if I could ever move through these streets without seeing him in every shadow, in every reflection, in every corner. I wondered if the snow would ever be enough to cover the past. I turned back toward the apartment, bag still in hand. The footprints behind me were already fading into white. The town seemed peaceful, gentle, calm. But I knew the peace was only an illusion. The ghosts of memory walked these streets with me. I wondered how far I could go before they caught up. The lamppost flickered one last time as I passed. The shadows stretched long across the snow, reaching for me, brushing against my boots like fingers I could not see. I took a deep breath. One step at a time I kept moving. The streets were quiet. Too quiet. And I realized, as the snow pressed against the windowsills and the town slept beneath its white blanket, that some weight could not be escaped. It had to be carried, carefully, quietly, like fragile glass in gloved hands. The snow lay thick on the rooftops and sidewalks, muting the world into soft shapes and muted sounds. My boots crunched rhythmically against icy patches, a brittle cadence that felt too loud in the quiet morning. I carried the small bag close to my chest, careful not to let it swing. The streetlights still glimmered pale and gold, though the sun had begun its slow climb behind clouds heavy with more snow. I could see my breath curling like smoke, fading quickly in the chill. The town seemed serene, untouched, almost timeless. And yet, every step felt loaded, as if the world knew something I was trying to hide. A few blocks in, I caught sight of Mrs. Delaney, leaning over her mailbox, scarf tucked tightly under her chin. She paused, smiled faintly, and nodded at me. The kind of smile that carried memory, that knew, without asking, the story of my mornings, my evenings, my quiet heartbreaks. I nodded back quickly, avoiding her gaze, afraid that recognition might undo the careful control I had clung to all night and morning. She waved a hand briefly, oblivious to my inner tension, kept walking. The sound of snow under my boots was the only accompaniment to the rapid thrum of my heartbeat. A man with a red scarf passed in the opposite direction. He glanced at me and smiled. I looked away, catching only the corner of his mouth, the tilt of his hat. And for a split second, the street felt smaller, crowded with faces that belonged to stories I no longer lived. I could feel the past brushing against me like a cold wind, unseen yet undeniable. I wondered if everyone I passed carried some memory of him, or if it was just mine, bleeding into the shapes and movements of strangers. Each glance felt like a test, a reminder that leaving might not erase what had once been. The corner cafe appeared ahead, windows fogged with warmth. I remembered him here, leaning across the table, his hand brushing mine accidentally, deliberately, neither of us speaking. I swallowed hard, forcing my gaze forward. I couldn't look back, not now. Not when every step toward the station was a delicate negotiation between courage and fear. The snow softened the sounds of the town, but it could not soften the echoes of memory lodged in my chest. Each heartbeat thundered loudly, reckless against the soft hush of morning. I passed the bookstore, the one with the green awning, and caught the reflection of myself in the glass. Pale, tense, clutching the bag that carried my history and my plans. I realized suddenly that the bag was heavier than I'd thought. Not because of what it contained, but because of the weight of leaving, of stepping away from the life that had once been whole. I brushed my gloved hand over the glass, leaving a smear like a fingerprint of uncertainty. The reflection wavered, fractured by frost and distortion, and for a moment I wondered if the town itself was conspiring to make me see everything I wanted to forget. A group of children ran past, sleds scraping across icy patches. They shrieked in delight, oblivious to the weight of memory or heartache. I watched them, the sound cutting sharply through the quiet, and felt both envy and longing. The town moved around me, alive and ignorant, carrying on while I bore every echo of the past. The mailman trudged by slowly, pulling a cart behind him. His eyes lingered for a moment, curious, polite, and I thought I saw recognition there too, as if he could sense the invisible string tethering me to my old life. I kept moving, one step after another, careful not to falter. The bridge over the frozen river came into view. Its railings were iced, shimmering under the low sun. I paused, letting the wind hit my face, sharp and clean. The river below moved slowly, hidden beneath ice and snow, and I thought about how time moved the same way. Relentless, hidden, impossible to control. I considered turning back, just for a moment, to look at the town I had loved and feared in equal measure. But one glance backward could unravel months of carefully stitched distance. I swallowed, and my legs carried me forward. Across the street, a man shoveled snow in front of his house. I caught the movement of his arm, the rhythm of his work, and for a second I imagined it was him, or the memory of him, clearing paths, shaping the world to his presence. My chest tightened. I drew the scarf tighter around my neck, as if the fabric could shield me from recognition, from memory, from everything I feared I would see. The streetlights reflected off icy patches, fracturing into tiny prisms. Every reflection seemed to hold a story, every shadow a whisper. I felt eyes on me, though no one followed. The station was a few blocks ahead. Its brick walls were dusted with snow, and the platform stretched quiet and pale in the morning light. I could see the tracks glimmering under the thin layer of frost. I imagined the train pulling up, doors opening, heat spilling into the cold, and I imagined stepping inside, leaving the streets behind. But even as I neared it, I wondered if the journey offered escape, or simply a confrontation waiting somewhere along the tracks. The town had already reminded me of what I was trying to forget. Would leaving change that, or just carry the ghosts with me, silently and persistently? I paused at the top of the station steps. The bag felt impossibly heavy in my hands now, though it was no heavier than before. It was the weight of all the glances, all the memories, all the ghosts lingering in snow and shadows. I could feel them pressing, delicate but insistent, against my shoulders, my chest, my heart. The tracks stretched away, pale and infinite, and I realized that leaving might not erase him from my world. It might only stretch the distance between us, a line of cold metal and quiet snow that could never hide memory. I took a breath and stepped onto the platform. The wind tugged at my coat, scattering fine powder of snow around my boots. The cat of my thoughts, the small, sharp ache of what had been, followed me quietly, patiently. I tightened my grip on the bag, and my boots crunched against the frost. The town behind me seemed peaceful, beautiful, unchanged. But I knew the peace was only a veneer. I looked forward at the tracks, at the small train that would come for me, and felt both dread and relief. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. The snow pressed against the windowsills and rooftops like quiet witnesses. And as I waited, I realized that the journey was not about distance. It was about stepping forward, one deliberate, careful step at a time. The world was quiet, too quiet, and I held my breath, bag close, eyes forward, ready for whatever came next. The train hummed softly as I stepped aboard, the doors sliding shut with a muted sigh. The carriage smelled faintly of wood polish and lingering coffee. Outside, the world was white, blurred, moving past the frosted windows like a half-remembered dream. I found a seat by the glass, dropped my small bag onto the floor, and pressed my palm against the cold pane. The snow slid past in slow sheets, obscuring the trees, the rooftops, the fences I had tried to leave behind. Everything seemed distant. Everything seemed possible. I settled into the seat, pulling my coat tighter around me, tucking the scarf close to my chin. The cold from the window seeped through, but I didn't mind. It was a quiet reminder of the world outside and the one I carried inside. My fingers traced the strap of the bag, feeling the weight of what I had packed: letters, ornaments, folded sweaters. Each item a relic of laughter, arguments, and small tenderness. I breathed slowly, letting the rhythmic sway of the train soothe and unsettle me at the same time. There was calm in the motion, yet my chest tightened with every blur of white that passed. I watched the trees, their branches heavy with snow, drooping like tired shoulders. I remembered walking these same woods with him, holding hands, teasing one another over thin ice, over snow that seemed endless in its softness. The memory cut sharper than the winter air. I felt the warmth of his laughter against my ear, felt the brush of his hand against mine, and the echo of arguments we had whispered, lingering still. The train's motion turned the world outside into streaks of white, and in contrast, the memories inside me became impossibly vivid. I swallowed, pressing my fingertips to my lips. A small child across the aisle pointed at the snowy trees, eyes wide with wonder. The mother smiled, shushing the excitement gently. I looked away, focusing instead on the blurred white beyond the window, afraid that acknowledgement might pull the past into the present. I realized the train was both a sanctuary and a lens. It moved me physically, but the past flowed through me like the wind against the carriage. Every memory, every shared smile, every argument and tender touch replayed in loops sharper than reality. The rhythmic clatter of the tracks became almost hypnotic. Click-clack, click-clack. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the sound guide me. In that moment I could feel the heartbeat of the train, a measured pulse that echoed the pulse of my own chest. I remembered arguments over nothing and everything, laughter in kitchens, hands brushing while reaching for the same mug. I remembered holding ornaments, decorating a tree, and stepping back to see our reflections in its tinsel. I pressed my hands to my coat, as if the fabric could serve as armor, shielding me from the past that seemed to chase me even now. A shadow fell across the window as the train passed under a bridge. I lifted my eyes and saw my reflection alongside the snow and sky. Pale face, tired eyes, shoulders rounded under layers of coat. The reflection was honest and relentless. I wanted to look away, to escape the mirror of my own thoughts. The train moved, yet the memories did not. They clung like frost, thin and sharp against the glass of my mind. I reached into my bag and pulled out one of the letters I had packed. It smelled faintly of paper and ink, a comforting ache. I unfolded it, read a few lines, then refolded it with slow care. It was safe here with me, far from the apartment, far from the town, yet somehow still heavy. I realized that leaving physically could not separate me from what I carried inside. Each sentence, each photograph, each folded sweater was stitched into my memory. The train could speed forward, but the past moved with me, patient, insistent, unavoidable. Outside, the trees passed in a blur, snow shaking from branches onto frozen ground. I watched the white landscape and felt an uncanny calm, a distance from danger, from the shadows of familiar streets. It was almost a relief to see the world move past without recognition, without judgment, without expectation. Yet my mind refused the same quiet. Memories rose unbidden, like smoke curling through the carriage. Laughter, anger, tenderness, small betrayals I had buried under time and careful routines. I tightened the scarf, pulled my coat closer, pressed my hands into my lap. The child across the aisle pressed a button to light a small reading lamp. It cast a soft glow, illuminating the folds of my coat and the texture of the bag beside me. I felt the warmth briefly, fragile against the cold shadows of thought. I wondered silently if this journey was meant to offer freedom or confrontation. The tracks clattered under the wheels, a slow, steady rhythm, and I followed it with my thoughts. The world outside moved in long, pale lines. The world inside me remained fractured, stitched together with invisible threads I could neither cut nor loosen. I let the letter return to its corner in the bag. The fabric felt warm beneath my hands, a small anchor in the moving world. I watched the frozen rivers, the blurred barns, the rooftops dusted white, and felt the quiet ache of leaving both behind and within. The train continued, a measured, indifferent heartbeat across the snow-laden landscape. I realized that moving forward did not erase the past. It only created space for the present to breathe, however small, however fleeting. The carriage swayed slightly, and I leaned against the window. Frost patterns glimmered in the light, delicate as lace. I traced them with my fingertip, imagining they were barriers, shields against the memories that pressed closest. For a moment, I let myself simply breathe, let the clatter of the tracks guide me instead of the memories. The sun shifted behind clouds, casting long, diffused beams across the seat in front of me. I thought of him, and I thought of all the small, tender moments that had no place on this moving train. I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm lull me, and I realized the past would always follow. I could not leave it behind. All I could do was carry it carefully, protect myself against its sharper edges, and step forward anyway. The snow streaked past the window, blurring everything I knew. And for the first time in hours, I let the train carry me without fighting its motion. The world outside was white, soft, and moving. The world inside me was raw, alive, stitched into every thought. I leaned my forehead against the glass. And I understood that the journey was not toward forgetting, but toward living, carrying memory as quietly and deliberately as I carried myself. The door closed behind me with a soft thud, echoing faintly in the narrow hallway. The smell of pine cleaner and old would hit my nose, faint but grounding. Outside, snow fell steadily, muffling the world in white silence. I set my bag down by the bed and ran my fingers over the smooth surface of the dresser. The inn was small, almost bare. A chair in the corner, a single lamp on the bedside table, a fireplace with kindling stacked neatly beside it. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, leaving nothing to distract from your own thoughts. I closed the door fully, letting the lock click softly behind me. The room felt protective, yet isolating, like a cocoon made of air and wood. I walked to the window and watched the snow blanket the street outside, softening the outlines of rooftops and fences. Each flake seemed to slow time, yet I could feel the minutes stretching too long. I sat on the edge of the bed, folding my hands in my lap, noticing how tense my shoulders were. Leaving had been necessary, I told myself. Self-preservation, not cowardice. But even as I said it, a small flicker of doubt brushed across my mind, quiet and insistent. I stepped closer to the fireplace and struck a match. The flame danced briefly, then caught the kindling, crackling softly as it grew. The warmth reached out, brushing my fingertips as I held them near, and for a moment, I let myself imagine that warmth spreading through my chest, through the ache I carried. But the fire also highlighted the emptiness of the room, the walls bare, the chair uninviting, the lamp casting long shadows across the floor. I realized the warmth could only reach so far. The room could shelter me physically, but it could not touch the memories clinging stubbornly to the edges of my mind. I placed my bag carefully beside the bed, fingers lingering on the strap. Inside were relics of past Christmases, letters and ornaments folded into neat bundles, memories pressed into fabric and paper. Each item was a reminder of him, of US, of everything that had once been tender and now felt impossible. I wondered if leaving had been right. Was it self-preservation or avoidance? Could distance truly protect me from the weight of the past, or had I merely delayed the inevitable confrontation? I sat on the chair in the corner, back stiff against the straight wooden frame. The lamp cast a soft glow over the pages of a book I had brought but not opened. Outside, the snow fell quietly, muffled against the roofs, the streets, the sleeping town. I listened to the occasional crackle of the fire, the faint groan of the building settling, and realized how loud silence could feel. It left room for thought, for doubt, for questions I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. I traced the edge of the lamp with my finger, feeling its smooth metal, letting my mind wander to the other place I had left behind. A shadow passed across the window as the wind shifted. I held my breath, imagining it might be him, coming to undo the fragile peace I had tried to construct. The thought made my chest tighten. Even in solitude, I could not escape the presence of memory. The snow softened the world, but it could not soften the echoes in my mind. Each flake was beautiful, silent, and indifferent, unlike the past, which demanded attention, demanded reckoning, demanded remembrance. I moved closer to the bed and sat, wrapping my arms around myself. The bag lay beside me, silent and waiting. I imagined opening it, taking out each letter, each photograph, each tiny ornament, and reliving each moment again. The thought made me pause, hesitate. Was I strong enough for that? Was the room enough to shield me from what I would feel? Or was it only a pause, a temporary sanctuary before reality caught up again? The fireplace crackled softly, throwing amber light onto the walls. I watched the shadows dance, imagining them moving like the past itself, gentle, teasing, never fully gone. I considered writing, but the pen felt heavy, the paper empty, mirroring the room around me. I wondered if solitude could heal, if silence could soothe, if distance could protect. Or if it merely postponed what was coming, the confrontation I could not avoid forever. I glanced at the window again, watching the snow pile against the sill. It seemed so calm, so ordered, so indifferent to worry or fear. I envied that indifference. I envied the way the world outside accepted what was, without pushing, without judgment, without insistence. I pressed my forehead to the glass, letting the cold seep through. It was grounding, a reminder that the room and the inn could offer protection, if only I allowed it. I wrapped my coat around me tighter, pulling the scarf snug against my neck. The bag was still at my side, small and waiting. I considered leaving again, stepping out into the snow, moving forward physically to outrun memory. But the fire and the walls reminded me that some distance is not physical, some weight cannot be moved. I could step outside, travel farther, escape the town, the streets, the faces. But I could not escape him. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. I sat quietly, listening to the soft pop of the fire, the muffled fall of snow, the faint groan of settling wood. It was a fragile piece, delicate as frost on the windowpane. I held it carefully, as one holds a small bird, aware that the slightest motion could shatter it. And I realized, this room, this inn, this solitude, it was not an ending. It was preparation. Was. A quiet before the next moment, before the inevitable reckoning. I leaned back in the chair, letting the warmth of the fire brush my face. The snow continued to fall, soft and muffled, indifferent to doubt or fear. I wondered if fleeing had been the right choice. I wondered if confrontation could bring closure, or if solitude only postponed what I could not avoid. The flicker of doubt remained, quiet, persistent, like the shadows dancing on the walls. And I knew that tonight, in this small, protective room, I would wrestle with it, one heartbeat, one thought, one memory at a time. The fire popped again, sending a brief warmth across the room. Outside, snow muffled the town, hiding streets, rooftops, and the familiar corners of memory. I let myself breathe slowly, letting the quiet settle like a blanket. For now, solitude was enough. For now, the room was safe. But tomorrow, I knew the past would find me again. Night had settled over the town like a soft, heavy blanket. The streets were empty, except for the occasional flicker of a lamppost casting long, hesitant shadows across the snow-dusted sidewalks. I stepped out of the inn, my coat wrapped tight, my boots crunching softly against the thin layer of frost. The air was sharp but quiet, scented faintly with pine and the distant smoke of chimneys. Every step felt deliberate, measured, as if the snow itself would betray me if I moved too fast. And yet, the town seemed familiar, though unfamiliar, every corner whispering a memory I had tried to leave behind. It was as if the past had followed, slipping between shadows, waiting. I walked slowly, letting the glow of the lampposts guide me. The snow began again, drifting down in delicate flakes, layering the world in white, masking detail but not memory. I remembered walking these streets with him, hands brushing against mine, laughter spilling into the winter air, arguments whispered in doorways and alleys, apologies lingering like frost. I felt that same tension now, a delicate mixture of fear and longing twisting in my chest. Every step forward seemed like progress, yet each shadow reminded me that I could not outrun what I carried inside. The past was stitched into these streets, into these rooftops, into the very air I breathed. A faint sound reached me, the distant echo of a bell from the church tower. It rang once, twice, and then was swallowed by the snow. I imagined it calling his voice back to me, though I knew it was only memory, conjured by the quiet night. I stopped, letting the wind brush my face, letting the flakes settle in my hair, on my coat. The cold was tangible, but it could not numb the ache of remembrance. I felt it coil in my chest, curling around my ribs, tightening my breath in ways that warmth or distance could not soften. I passed a shop with lights spilling golden onto the sidewalk. The window displayed a small wreath, pine cones dusted with fake snow, and inside, the faint glow of candlelight flickering against ornaments. For a moment I froze. The scent of pine and wood smoke reached me even through the glass, bringing with it a flood of memory. Christmas mornings, small wrapped gifts, laughter we shared before the silence grew too loud. I pressed my palm against the cold pane, imagining I could reach through time, touch the warmth of those days, feel the comfort I once held. And yet, when I pulled back, the warmth was gone. Only reflection remained, the streetlight bending my shadow across the snow like a ghost. I continued down the lane, boots crunching softly, breath visible in the frozen air. Every street corner, every flickering light seemed to carry him. The tilt of his head, the curve of his smile, the way his hand would brush mine almost accidentally. The past pressed closer in the quiet, in the rhythm of my steps, in the whisper of snow against rooftops. I realized then that memory is a shadow that refuses to be left behind, a shape that follows, growing clearer in the absence of noise. I wanted to run, to shake free, to outrun the town, the streets, the ghosts of us. But the snow slowed me, softened my escape, and forced me to confront the ache I carried. A sudden gust of wind lifted flakes into my face. I blinked, shivering, pulling the scarf tighter around my neck. I thought of him not as he had been, but as he existed in memory, a version stitched from laughter and argument, from tenderness and sharp words. I wondered if he remembered me the same way, or if our shared past had already begun to fade, one-sided and delicate like the snow that now coated the rooftops. The thought made my chest tighten again. I realized I could flee physically, but the mind carries its own train of thought, untethered by distance. I turned a corner and entered a quieter lane. The lampposts here flickered intermittently, casting patches of light that seemed unsure of themselves. I walked beneath them slowly, letting the shadows stretch and bend across the snow. Every shadow seemed to hold a fragment of memory. His laugh, a glance, a word said too softly or too sharply. I felt the weight of it pressing in, delicate yet unyielding. I wanted to tell myself it was just snow, just night, just memory. But the heart does not reason in such neat terms. It carries shadows like luggage, heavy and silent, even when the world outside is soft and forgiving. The snow picked up again, flurries dancing across the street, settling on the edges of rooftops like a fragile veil. I stopped in the middle of the lane, letting it settle on my shoulders, on my hair. The cold was sharp against my skin, yet comforting in its simplicity. I let my eyes drift over the town, the darkened windows, the flickering lamplight, the snow-curved streets. And I realized how deeply the past clung, how small acts, familiar scents, quiet corners, could pull it from hiding. It was not a place I could abandon easily. It was stitched into every thought, every heartbeat, every step. I walked on, each footfall deliberate, boots pressing into the softening snow. The town was silent, but the past spoke in whispers, in shadows, in the soft scent of pine that lingered against the chill. I wondered how long I could walk these streets, how long I could pretend that distance and snow might shield me from what waited in memory. The answer came slowly. Not long. The past cannot be outrun, not truly. It waits in corners, in shadows, in the scent of wood smoke, patient and insistent. I paused beneath a lamppost whose light wavered like a hesitant heartbeat. The snow fell softly, blanketing the street in white quiet. I felt the delicate tension between fear and longing tighten in my chest. Could I face the past, or would I always walk beneath its shadows, circling, careful, hesitant? I drew a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs. And I realized that tonight, under this flickering light, surrounded by snow and silence, I could not escape. I could only move forward, carrying memory with me, step by careful step. The shadows pressed closer as I walked, stretching and bending in the lamplight. They were not just shapes. They were pieces of a life I could not leave behind, reminders that the past is never as distant as it seems. I kept moving, letting the snow fall on my coat, letting the quiet surround me. And I understood, running was no longer an option. I would meet these shadows eventually, one step at a time. The lamp beside the bed cast a pale circle of light across the room. Outside, the wind rattled lightly against the windowpane, snow piling quietly against the sill. I had settled into the quiet of the inn, letting the soft glow and muffled world outside cradle me. My hands rested on my lap, still heavy with the weight of yesterday's steps and tonight's shadows. And then my phone buzzed. A small vibration, almost polite, almost courteous. I hadn't expected it. Not here, not now. I picked it up slowly, as if touching it too quickly might set something off. The screen illuminated my face. His name appeared. Simple, precise, visual. My pulse stuttered, quick and uneven, and the room seemed to tighten around me. The words were simple, almost gentle. Meet me at the bridge where we first laughed together. I swallowed. The phrase hung in the air, nostalgic and unsettling at once. Memories rose unbidden, snow-dusted bridges, laughter caught in frozen air, hands brushing against mine, warmth that had been both comforting and dangerous. I placed the phone on the table, staring at it as though the wood itself might answer the questions I could not. The fireplace crackled softly, orange light flickering against the walls, but it no longer offered comfort. Instead, the quiet of the inn felt oppressive, as if the very air was watching me, waiting. I felt my hands tremble, fingers curling into the edge of the blanket. Curiosity gnawed at my resolve, sharp and unrelenting. Could I ignore this? Could I pretend it had never arrived? Hide behind these walls, behind the safety of solitude? And yet, I wanted to read it again, feel the words, understand the tone that could only be his. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulling the blanket closer around me. The text glowed, innocuous but loaded, like a small stone skipping across a still pond, sending ripples in every direction. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady my breathing, to slow my pulse. The inn was silent, except for the occasional pop from the fire, yet my mind was suddenly loud, full of what-ifs and half-formed decisions. What if I went? What if I stayed? The simplicity of the text belied the weight it carried, and I felt caught between desire and fear. I rose and walked slowly to the window, pressing my forehead to the cold glass. The snow outside had thickened, swirling against the lamplight in patterns that seemed deliberate, choreographed. Each flake reminded me of the path I had walked to get here, each step echoing in memory. I thought of the bridge, that bridge, frozen in time, where laughter had once spilled freely, before silence, before absence. I traced the edge of the windowpane with my fingertip, trying to find clarity in the cold. But clarity was a stranger tonight. All I could feel was the flicker of doubt, and the insistent pull of a past I had tried to leave behind. I returned to the bed, sitting with my back against the headboard, phone in hand. The text seemed to breathe, as though it were aware of the hesitation it provoked. I imagined him typing, choosing the words with precision, understanding the effect they would have. I imagined his voice in my memory, soft yet insistent, drawing me toward a place I had thought I would never return. I closed my eyes and let the memory linger. The weight of his gaze, the curve of his smile, the warmth of a laugh that had once felt like home. And in that moment I realized, my sanctuary was fragile, perhaps illusionary. I set the phone down again, letting the words rest on the bedside table, glowing faintly in the lamplight. I wrapped the blanket tighter around myself, feeling its soft fibers against my skin, a poor shield against the surge of emotion. The room was quiet, but the quiet itself had turned heavy, filled with unspoken possibilities. Each shadow cast by the lamp seemed to stretch toward me, pressing gently, reminding me that nothing stays hidden forever. Even here, even in this small, protective space, the past had a voice. I rose and walked toward the fireplace, letting the warmth brush my hands, letting the crackle distract me from the pulse racing in my chest. I thought of reasons to stay, reasons to ignore the message. The safety of distance, the comfort of routine, the walls that had become a temporary sanctuary. But the text lingered in my mind like smoke in a room. It would not dissipate without air, without confrontation. I wondered if going would bring closure, or if it would open doors I was not ready to walk through. Could a single meeting unravel months of careful separation? Could I withstand the memory made tangible again? I moved back to the bed, sitting cross-legged, phone resting in my palms like a fragile bird. I let my thumb hover over the screen, feeling the hesitation, the pull of the unknown. Outside, snow drifted against the window, coating the world in silence and soft white. Inside, the inn felt suddenly smaller, heavier, as though the walls themselves anticipated the choice I faced. I debated staying, debated leaving, debated everything in the space between breaths. The flicker of doubt that had begun in the streets now pulsed in my chest, insistent and urgent. I finally let the phone slip into the blanket beside me, breathing slowly, deliberately. I did not open it again, did not reply, but the words lingered, echoing softly in the room. The fire popped, sending a warm glow across the bedspread. Outside, the snow continued its quiet descent, covering streets, rooftops, and familiar corners. I felt the weight of decision pressing against me, the invisible threads of memory tightening like fine wire. Could I face him? Could I remain hidden, letting the fragile peace of this room persist a little longer? The questions had no immediate answer, only the soft hum of uncertainty. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the heaviness of the blanket anchor me. The room was quiet, but I could feel possibility curling around the edges, gentle, insistent, patient. Even as the snow fell, even as the night deepened, the message waited, precise and casual, like a hand reaching from the past into the present. And I knew that tomorrow I would have to choose. Confront. The inn could protect me for now, but it could not protect me forever. I let the firelight play across the walls, shadows dancing like fragments of memory. The snow outside muffled the town, but it could not mute the pulse of anticipation inside me. I breathed deeply, feeling the tremor in my hands, the quickened heartbeat, the quiet tension of a world poised between fear and desire. And as I curled beneath the blanket, I understood the truth. The past would not wait, and neither could I. The night stretched before me, full of decision and shadows, and I was left with a fragile question. Could I meet it without breaking? The snow had thickened by the time I left the inn, drifting in lazy spirals that softened the edges of the town. Each step on the walkway was muffled, boots pressing into the powder as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The park lay ahead, faintly outlined through the veil of falling snow, a familiar world made strange by distance and silence. I could see the bare branches, black against the muted sky, each one heavy with snow, each one a quiet witness. The bridge we had kissed once glimmered faintly under the lamplight, coated in frost. I felt the weight of memory settle into my chest, thick and cold. Every heartbeat seemed louder here, echoing against the empty paths, against the snow, against the hesitation that had brought me this far. I paused at the park entrance, pulling my scarf tighter, letting the chill brush my cheeks. The air was sharp, scented faintly with pine and the smoke of distant chimneys. I could hear nothing but the soft rustle of flakes against the ground, and the hollow rhythm of my own pulse. For a moment, I thought about turning back, slipping into the protective shadow of the inn and pretending the message had never come. But something deeper, quieter, urged me forward, the knowledge that this was not just about him, not just about the past. It was about me, reclaiming space inside my own chest that had been held hostage by memory and longing. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold fill my lungs, and stepped onto the bridge. He was already there, as if he had known exactly when I would arrive. Older, yes, but familiar in the way that memories linger. The tilt of his head, the way his hands rested at his sides, relaxed but attentive. I stopped a few feet away, the snow crunching softly under my boots. We didn't speak immediately. The world seemed to pause around us. The falling snow muffled everything except the tension that hung between us, delicate and heavy all at once. I traced his features in the fading light, noting the lines that hadn't existed before, the hair flecked with gray. And I realized that time had passed, yet some part of him remained stitched to the corners of my memory. "Clara," he said finally, voice low, careful. I nodded, keeping my hands hidden in the folds of my coat. He stepped closer, though still a respectful distance away, and I felt the pull of familiarity, the ache of old comfort. The snow fell around us, dusting our coats, settling in our hair. We moved slowly, circling the memory of the park, each gesture precise, measured. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure I would," I replied. The words were simple, but heavy, carriers of months of doubt, of longing, of what-ifs. We walked slowly along the path, the bridge beneath us creaking faintly under the weight of snow. I kept my gaze ahead, focusing on the icy water below, on the distorted reflection of our silhouettes. He spoke of small things at first, the weather, the town, the way the snow had changed the park. And then the conversation shifted, quietly, delicately, toward what had been, toward what we had lost. Every word was layered with tension, regret, and unspoken longing. I felt my chest tighten, not from fear of him, but from the realization that the confrontation was never really about him. It was about the years I had carried inside me, about reclaiming the parts of my heart I had surrendered long ago. A gust of wind lifted snowflakes into my face, and I blinked against the cold. He reached up, brushing a flake from his own coat, a slow, thoughtful movement. I realized then how carefully we were navigating this space, each gesture weighed with memory, each word selected with precision. The frost in the air mirrored the frost in our hearts, sharp and unyielding, yet beneath it, something tender still lingered. I wanted to reach for it, to feel warmth without fear, but the past had taught me caution. I understood that closure would not come from anger, or from demands, or even from his apology. It would come from claiming myself, from standing here fully aware of memory and longing, without letting either pull me under. We stopped on the bridge, side by side but separated by years and hesitation. I looked at him, seeing both the man he had become and the boy I had loved. He looked at me, and I thought I saw recognition, surprise, a hint of sadness. The snow continued to fall, muting the world around us, enclosing us in a quiet sanctuary of memory. I took a deep breath, letting the cold fill my lungs, and exhaled slowly. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of past and present settle into something still and resolute. He began and then stopped. I shook my head gently, letting the silence carry what words could not. The bridge creaked beneath us again, faintly, like it remembered every step we had ever taken. I realized then that the confrontation had never been about his remorse, or his presence. It was about the reclamation of my own heart, the courage to face the past, to feel the ache, to acknowledge longing without surrendering to it. And I understood, in the quiet, snow-dusted light of dusk, that I could hold both memory and freedom at once. We turned slowly, retracing steps along the bridge, letting the snow settle on our shoulders. He said nothing further, and I did not ask. The world was small and soft around us, filtered through flakes and fading light. I felt the tension ease, subtle and gentle, like a tide retreating. And for a moment I was only here, only present, only myself. I took the first step away, boots crunching in the soft snow, feeling the bridge beneath my feet. He watched, as I knew he would, letting me claim the distance I needed. The shadows lengthened, the snow continued to fall, and the air seemed to hold its breath. I realized that closure was not about leaving him behind. It was about standing fully, choosing myself, and moving forward with the past acknowledged but not dictating my path. I glanced back once, catching the outline of him in the dim light. His expression was unreadable, but I felt no fear, only quiet understanding. The wind brushed against my face, the snow settled on my coat, and I felt the world soften around me. The bridge remained behind, memories folded into its structure like snow settling into cold timber. And as I walked toward the edge of the park, toward the streets that would carry me further, I understood. I was free, if only in this moment. The past would linger as it always does, but I could move through it, and beyond it, one careful, deliberate step at a time. The inn-room smelled faintly of pine and waxed floors. Outside, snow fell in slow, soft sheets, covering rooftops and streets in gentle quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, my bag open before me, and for the first time in days I moved deliberately. No trembling hands, no racing thoughts, just the quiet certainty of each choice. A sweater folded, a book stacked, a photograph slipped gently into its place. The world outside was muffled, soft-edged, and for once, I let myself breathe with it. The call, the texts, the shadows of memory, they all lingered, but their weight felt different now. It no longer pressed against my chest, no longer decided my steps. I reached for a small ornament, a delicate glass star we had hung together last Christmas. It caught the light from the lamp, fractured into tiny shards of warmth. I held it for a moment, feeling the cold glass, remembering the laughter that had accompanied it. And then I placed it carefully into the bag. Not to hide, not to mourn, but to honor. To remind myself that memory and freedom could coexist. Even the past could be carried lightly if I chose. The inn was silent. A cat slept curled on the windowsill, chest rising and falling with a slow, steady rhythm. I watched it for a moment, noting the way the snow pressed against the glass outside, painting the world white. It was a quiet reminder that the day, too, would reset. New light, new steps. I brushed my fingers over the zipper, feeling its smooth resistance, the small friction of movement that mirrored the careful pace of my thoughts. Each motion was deliberate. Fold, stack, tuck, slide, zip. And in the repetition I found calm. I paused, hands hovering over the bag. The small pile of items reflected not just things, but fragments of self. Joy, heartbreak, laughter, sorrow. Some I would carry forward, some I would leave behind. The act was not dramatic. No flames, no shouting, no tearing. Just quiet discernment. I could almost feel the tension of months unspooling, the nervous coil in my chest slowly loosening. Outside, the snow fell heavier, muting the street lamps into soft halos, as if the world itself conspired to give me this space. I picked up a letter, folded neatly, the ink slightly faded. I traced the handwriting with a fingertip. It was a memory, yes, but also a choice. I slipped it between two books in my bag. Not to revisit constantly, but to acknowledge that I had loved, and that love had shaped me. Even the ache had value. The past was no longer a chain. It was a texture of life, something I could touch, examine, and then place aside when needed. The lamp cast a warm glow across the bedspread. I watched the light shift as the snowflakes moved outside the window. Slow, deliberate, impossible to catch. I allowed myself a small smile. Not a triumphant one. Not a joyous one. Just a flicker, quiet and honest. It was enough. Enough to know that I could stand here, hold my bag, and face tomorrow without panic pressing in. I zipped the bag closed, hearing the small click at the end. The sound felt final but also gentle. A seal on this moment, this choice. I stood and carried it to the corner of the room, placing it carefully near the door. The bag was not heavy. It bore the weight of memory, yes, but it did not drag me down. It bore the promise of movement, of steps forward, of mornings that would come with light rather than shadows. I moved to the window, resting my forehead against the cool glass. The snow continued to fall, thickening, drifting, softening the world. The town below was quiet, blanketed, hushed. For the first time, the silence was not oppressive. It was protective. It was a companion. I thought briefly of him, the confrontation, the bridge, the shared winter kiss now folded into memory. And I felt nothing sharp, nothing urgent, only recognition, only the gentle understanding that the past had been honored, and that my heart remained my own. I breathed slowly, letting the cold air mix with the warmth inside. The room felt full yet empty, safe yet fragile. I could exist here, in this balance, without fear of losing myself again. The lamp flickered slightly, and I moved to straighten it. A small, insignificant gesture, but it mirrored the deliberate care I was taking with my own life. I ran my fingers along the surface of the nightstand, smoothing away imaginary dust, smoothing away the anxiety I had carried. Even my cat stirred, stretching, then settling again as if sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. I knelt beside the bag one last time. My hands rested lightly on the fabric. I thought of what I would carry forward. Courage, clarity, the gentle understanding that choice was mine. And I thought of what I could leave behind. Fear, uncertainty, the relentless ache of a past that no longer controlled me. The decision was quiet, deliberate, and full of relief. I stood, shoulders back, head high, feeling the first real sense of peace since the call had come. The snow continued to fall outside, painting the world in white and quiet. I could hear the faint creak of the inn settling, the wind shifting against the eaves, the soft exhale of the building around me. It was a moment suspended, delicate and luminous. I left the bag by the door, took a step back, and allowed myself one long, slow breath. Tomorrow would come with light. Tomorrow would come with steps into streets not yet walked. I had packed memories, yes, but also hope. I had packed lessons, love, and the first gentle flicker of freedom. And as I settled into the bed, snow drifting lazily against the windowpane, I whispered softly to myself, "What will I carry forward? And what will I finally leave behind?" The question lingered in the quiet, but for the first time it did not frighten me. It invited me. It offered me tomorrow. Outside, the snow fell endlessly, blanketing the world in calm. Inside I rested, holding the fragile, deliberate weight of my own choices. And for the first time in months, the night felt gentle, not heavy.